All right, folks, Drew Thomas Allen here, the Millennial Minister of Truth. Welcome to the program today. Your Left Coast Liberator, recording live from Mott Studios, Minister of Truth Studios. It's good to be with you today. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Wednesday. It's hump day. We're almost, we're approaching the weekend. Can't get here fast enough, if you ask me. But, folks, let me just tell you something. I am sick to death, absolutely fed up. I'm worn out. I'm ready to blow a gasket of this endless, tiresome, conspiracy-soaked drumbeat about the Israel lobby and the Jews. Every single time something doesn't go the way some isolationist, contrarian, or straight-up malcontent wants it to in this country, in Washington. And now, here we are with Thomas Massie, Mr. Pinecone himself, getting shown the door in his Kentucky primary. And what do we hear? The usual suspects wailing like it's some grand Zionist plot. AIPAC with bags of shekels buying the election. Dual loyalty this, foreign agent that. Oh, for the love of Pete's, give it a rest already, will you? You know, in the old days, when a guy like Massie, who's got a, well, sort of solid libertarian streak, votes against, foreign aid like clockwork, bucks the party line more than a rodeo bull, loses a primary, we talk about the politics. We talk about Trump endorsing his opponent, a Navy SEAL no less, and the base deciding they'd had enough of the lone wolf routine. We talk about voters in Kentucky saying, you know what? America first means securing our own borders and interests, not turning every foreign policy disagreement into a purity test that isolates you. But no, instead it's the same broken record. The Jews did it. The lobby, billions from Tel Aviv, as if pro-Israel Americans, millions of them, evangelical Christians like myself, conservatives who see Israel as a frontline ally against radical Islam, not some cabal in a smoky room, don't have every right to spend their own money supporting Canada to align with their views. This isn't some shadowy Israel lobby pulling strings like a puppet master in an old anti-Semitic cartoon. This is politics, folks. Open, legal, in-your-face interest group politics. AIPAC spent big. Absolutely true. Other groups did too. But last I checked, that's how the game works on everything from big pharma to the teachers' unions to the oil boys. You don't like it? Change the rules or beat them at the ballot box. Don't cry Jewish power every time your guy gets outspent and outvoted. Massie himself turned it into a referendum on foreign aid on Israel. And the voters said, thanks, but no thanks. We're not buying the narrative that standing with the only democracy in the Middle East makes us suckers. And you know what? Let's talk hypocrisy for a second, can we? I think we shall. Because while the conspiracy crowd out there obsesses over pro-Israel donors, they've been awful quiet about where some of Massie's own money came from. I'll pull this up because FEC records show the Marouk family, Muslim American donors from Texas with ties to pro-Palestinian causes, poured in thousands to Massie's campaign. Multiple family members maxed out at $7,000 each. Here's the receipts. Gaze long and hard at this foreign money or this, lobbyist type money. This is the same network, the Marouk family, that has funneled serious cash to the squad. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Ro Khanna, others who've trafficked in anti-Israel rhetoric that veers, frankly, into outright anti-Semitism. Now look at this list. Marouk. Look at the Marouks. Wow, they gave to James Tallarico in Texas as well. My goodness, what is this money? These people are trying to buy an election, buy his favor? Woo! Can't do that. You know, the folks who pushed, BDS, cheered globalize the Intifada, and they've turned, every Israel-related vote into a purity spiral against America's ally. That's who I'm talking about. That's who I'm talking about. And it's funny how that works. When pro-Israel Americans, Jews, Christians, conservatives, When they open their wallets for candidates who back a Democratic ally fighting Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, it's a foreign lobby conspiracy. But when donors link to the very movements funding the Squad's anti-Semitic Nazism, that wing, when they cut checks to Massie, crickets. Suddenly it's just free speech or anti-war activism. Give me a break. All interest groups play the game. Don't pretend only one side has foreign-tinged money while ignoring the Qatar-funded think tanks, all these Islamist networks, or these specific donors that are bankrolling the most radical voices in Congress. And I'll tell you why I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it because it's lazy. You know, this is the easy button for people who can't handle that America has allies, that shared values and strategic interests matter, and that not every single dollar sent overseas is treason. I mean, think of what you want about foreign aid. Israel takes our aid and then gives it back and gives back intel. It gives back tech, a bulwark against Iran and Hezbollah. Real threats, not phantoms. But mention that and suddenly you're captured by the lobby. Meanwhile, the same crowd cheers Qatari cash flooding think tanks or Chinese influence ops, and suddenly it's crickets. That's your hypocrisy. The Massie defeat's not just some dark victory for the Jews. It's a victory for voters who are exhausted by the endless carping, the isolationism dressed up as principle, and the refusal to see the world as it is. America's got friends worth keeping. And if a congressman spends more time railing against resolutions supporting our allies than fixing what's broken at home, well, the people of Kentucky just reminded him who he works for. So enough with the scapegoating. Enough with the tropes recycled from the fever swamps. We are better than this. America first doesn't mean America alone. I've said this 1,000 times on this show, and it sure as heck doesn't mean hunting for culprits with hooked noses under every bed, or selectively ignoring the donor class on the other side when it suits the narrative. Get over it. Move on. Fight the real fights, or just shut up and get out of our way. Now, I'll come back to this a little later in the program because I have more to say on it. But I want to turn our attention to Los Angeles for a moment since I'm seated in California. You know, every once in a while, the left puts on, such a spectacular show of absurdity that I almost feel guilty for getting paid to talk about it. Almost. But then I remember the real human cost. You know, the destroyed cities, the wasted billions, the failed policies, the innocent lives caught in the crossfire of their utopian fantasies, and any guilt I might have felt, don't worry, disappears faster than a taxpayer dollar in a California homelessness program. Now, this LA mayoral race is what I want to focus on because, you know, we're not really watching a serious mayoral race in some ways anymore, not as far as the progressives are concerned. We're watching season 47 of Progressive Survivor, Socialist Hunger Games edition, and the contestants are going for blood. Their knives are sharpened. There's no mercy, no shame. And of course, there's zero connection to reality. On one side, we have Karen Bass, right? Yes, the very same Karen Bass who in her younger radical days didn't just read the Little Red Book for a college class. She actually went down to Cuba in the 1970s with the Venceremos Brigade. She wasn't content to study communism from the safety of an American classroom. No. Karen Bass was out there doing construction work for the revolution, building it with her own two hands alongside Fidel Castro's communist regime. I mean, she still brags about it. She's recently bragged about it. How while, you know, other people were merely theorizing about Marxism, she was actively helping construct the communist utopia. Is it any surprise that under her direction as Los Angeles mayor, we've seen destruction? Now, that's not a youthful indiscretion that she grew out of. That is a core part of who Karen Bass is. And now she wants another shot to run one of America's largest cities. Have you heard about her latest brilliant, groundbreaking plan to solve the homelessness crisis that she helped exacerbate? It's incredible. Give meth addicts and crack users free taxpayer-funded dentures so they can flash that winning smile at job interviews right before they go back to firing up the pipe again. I'm not making this up. I am not. Look it up. This is actual policy coming from the sitting mayor. I mean, you almost have to laugh because if you didn't, you'd cry at home at how insane it's gotten. And you would think that that level of tone-deaf, out-of-touch radicalism would be impossible to top in a single election cycle. You would think. But then enters Nithya Raman, Ramen Noodle Brain, the proud Democratic Socialist councilwoman who looked at Karen Bass's catastrophic record and essentially said, "Hold my kombucha." Ramen's big idea for fighting wildfires? Ban backyard barbecues. Yes. In Los Angeles in 2026, with open-air fentanyl markets on every other corner, tent cities full of mentally ill arsonists, and neighborhoods that are still scarred from devastating fires, the greatest threat to public safety, according to her, is apparently dad grilling hamburgers on a Sunday afternoon in his own backyard. Because nothing says compassionate, progressive governance like criminalizing normal American life while ignoring the actual chaos on the streets. Am I right? Now, just some fun facts about those pesky wildfires and where the real danger is coming from. According to Los Angeles Fire Department data, there have been more than 75,000 homeless or encampment-related fires in the city since 2020. In 2025 alone, they logged nearly 17,000 of them. That's an average of 46 fires every single day. 46 every day. These aren't rare accidents. They are a constant drain on firefighters. They're a direct threat to neighborhoods, and they are sparked by homeless people cooking, smoking with their crack pipes in those tent cities with no oversight and zero accountability. Yet here is Nithya Raman Noodle Brain, laser focused on your backyard Weber grill instead of the open air hellscapes that are actually torching the city on the regular. You know, it's prioritizing politics over public safety. Are they clearing brush? No. Are they enforcing laws against encampments in high-risk areas? Heaven forbid. Are they sweeping out the mentally ill and addicts who keep starting these blazes? That would be cruel. But telling law-abiding families they can't flip burgers on a red flag day, now that is ramen noodle brain logic and leadership. And of course, this is peak progressive governance in LA. Ignore the root causes, right? The explosion of untreated homelessness, the drug markets, the refusal to clear fire-prone encampments, and instead micromanage the lives of normal citizens who pay the taxes that fund this disaster. I mean, while firefighters are over here running around from one encampment blaze to the next, Ramen Noodle Brain wants to make sure your Memorial Day cookout doesn't inconvenience the narrative. Hey, Noodle Brain, clean up the streets. Get the mentally ill and addicts into treatment or off the sidewalks, and stop pretending a dad with tongs is the reason LA keeps burning. The numbers don't lie. The tents do. But here is the absolute chef's kiss. This is the most delicious, poetic part of this entire circus. The DSA, that stands for the Democratic Socialists of America, the actual hardcore socialists, well, they just endorsed, who do you think they endorsed? Karen Bass, the communist, or Nithya Raman, their compatriot? They just endorsed Karen Bass over Ramen Noodle Brain. Let me repeat that slowly so it sinks in for every single listener and viewer. The socialists looked at the race between the woman who physically helped build communism in Cuba and the self-proclaimed democratic socialist, and they said, you know what? We're going with the communist. Even the radicals think Ramen Noodle Brain is too far gone. That should tell you everything you need to know about how extreme this field has become. And the only sane person standing in this entire race is Spencer Pratt from The Hills reality show. I mean, think about that for a second. In the race to lead America's second largest city, the voice of reason, lone voice of reason, is the guy from a reality TV show known for being the villain. Well, we're watching in LA. I mean, it's like a reality show that's produced, directed, and starring the far left, and the rest of us are stuck watching in horrified fascination to see whether Los Angeles gets governed by someone who literally helped build Castro's utopia or someone who wants to send the police to confiscate your Weber grill because the smoke might offend Mother Earth. And these are the same people who have the audacity to call conservatives the extremists. Now, according to the latest polls, fresh off the presses, last I looked anyway, it shows Karen Bass still clinging to a lead around 30%, Spencer Pratt surging to 22%, and Ramen Noodlebrain sitting at 19 to 20%. Pratt has gained a pretty stunning 12 points in just the last couple of months. He's closing fast on a platform of basic sanity, which brings me to the question that should blow the mind of every rational person still listening. How in the hell is Karen Bass still leading the polls in Los Angeles after everything this woman has done to that once great city? This is the mayor who was physically out of the country in Ghana. That's in Africa. For the low information people. She was in Ghana when the Palisades fires exploded. One of the most destructive fires in Los Angeles history. You know, the fire that burned Spencer Pratt's home to the ground, as well as many others. Now, while these homes were burning to the ground and families were fleeing for their lives, and entire neighborhoods were being reduced to nothing but ash and memories, the mayor of America's second largest city, Karen Bass, was halfway around the world attending a foreign inauguration. She didn't rush back when the news hit. She didn't make a clear public statement that she was leaving during one of the highest fire danger periods of the year either. She tried to manage this crisis through text messages from airplanes. And later she had the nerve to say it was one of the worst moments of her life. Oh, yes, indeed. Do you remember that infamous photo of George W. Bush looking out the window of Air Force One over the flooded ruins of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina? The media and the left crucified him for it. They called him detached, aloof. They called him out of touch, a symbol of uncaring Republican indifference. And they ran that image into the ground for years as proof that Bush didn't care about suffering Americans. How could the president just fly over and not be there on the ground, they wailed. Why didn't he parachute out of his plane to rescue people from the flood? And yet here is Karen Bass, a communist and Democrat, not just flying over the disaster, but literally on another continent while her city burned. And where is the same media firestorm? Where are the wall-to-wall segments calling her disconnected or demanding her resignation? Crickets. Suddenly it is, she was on official business. She regrets it. Let's move on. The double standard is so grotesque. Bush got roasted for an aerial survey on his way back to D.C. Bass was sipping cocktails at an embassy party in Ghana as Pacific Palisades turned to cinders, and the press barely raised an eyebrow. This is your leadership in Blue City, America. Jet off for photo ops abroad while ignoring the warnings at home. Then you come back and you lecture everyone about compassion. And the people of Los Angeles deserved, as any human being and citizenry does, a mayor who was present when the Santa Ana winds were screaming and the fire risk was off the charts. Instead, they got radio silence from 10,000 miles away. And this is the same mayor, Bass, who cut the Los Angeles Fire Department budget right before fire season hit. This is the mayor who has spent billions upon billions of our taxpayer dollars in California, yours in Los Angeles, on homelessness programs with virtually nothing to show for it. The tents are still choking the sidewalks. The open drug markets are thriving. The human misery, the hopelessness, the chaos on the streets has only gotten worse under her watch. And yet, thanks to decades of radical ideological capture, the voters in Los Angeles have been so conditioned that they keep rewarding this level of spectacular failure. And meanwhile, normal, sane Angelenos who are tired of stepping over needles and human waste on their way to work, they're finally waking up and saying, we cannot take this anymore. And that is why Spencer Pratt is surging. This race is not just about policy anymore. It is about whether Los Angeles wants to keep tripling down, quadrupling down on failure and radical ideology, or whether it's finally ready to try something, anything different. And I want to get back into Massie in a second, but first I just want to play this clip of Karen Bass to show you how these progressives take the vote from the citizen for granted, how arrogant they are, how unapologetic they are. Listen to this interview asking her about the homeless problem, which didn't upload. So never mind. Wait. That's one way to kill the beautiful crescendo. But basically, she was asking in this interview, hey, you didn't solve homelessness, did you? And she says, well, no, I didn't know how tough the bureaucracy was, as if it was the bureaucracy that was preventing her from fixing these wildfires. And she says, well, now I'm prepared. Just vote for me again and I'll solve the problem. This is the progressives every time. They create hell and they say, well, don't worry, I've got the solutions this time around. It's an unbelievable thing. Sorry, I've got a little cough here. And no water to save me. All right, let's just get back into Thomas Massie here because he got exactly what he deserved. Oh, my friends, what a glorious, richly deserved night it was in Kentucky. Thomas Massie, the self-anointed king of the libertarian right, the darling of every online so-called independent thinker and podcast warrior, the guy who spent years positioning himself as the only honest man left in Washington. Well, he just got absolutely humiliated, obliterated in his own Republican primary. Trump endorsed Navy SEAL and dairy farmer Ed Galrine, beat the 8-term incumbent by a solid 54.8% to 45.2%. Massie, the man who acted like he was untouchable and above it all, he got dragged by the very voters he claimed to represent so purely. And how did this great principled conservative handle a fair and square defeat? With grace, with class, with any semblance of sportsmanship or maturity? Of course not. In his concession speech, Massie decided to show the world exactly what kind of sore loser he really is. And I do have that clip, and I'll play it now.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrine in Tel Aviv. I did get the call through, though. I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way.
We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way. Right after being completely dishonorable by, using his little Jewish trope there. Real smooth, Tommy. Your opponent just beat you in a Republican primary, and your first instinct is to snide, bitter, anti-Israel jab. That's not principle. That's not intellectual honesty. That is a little temper tantrum by a very small man who couldn't handle rejection from his own base. This is the same Thomas Massie who spent years grandstanding in front of every camera, courting the influencer crowd, building a brand as the noble lone wolf, fighting the evil establishment. And I'll tell you what, it's a good thing this happened for Thomas Massie because it's where he wants to be, because he didn't really want to be effective in Congress. He wanted to be a famous social media personality. And so he got what he wanted and what he deserved. The podcasters, the Twitter warriors, ex-warriors, the grifters, they all lined up behind him. They told their audiences he was a hero, that he was being targeted because he was too pure, too good, too independent. And it turns out that social media echo chambers are not the real world. The actual working, tax-paying, family-raising Republican voters in Kentucky's 4th district looked at his record and said, no thanks. Why? Because Massie, and I don't care, maybe some of you love Massie and you're upset about this, but he lost, and I predicted a loss, and I wanted him to lose. So I'm telling you why this happened. And you can listen and learn, Or you can just put your head in the sand and keep losing for the rest of your life, because Massie was never a reliable team player. He voted against his own party time after time on critical issues. He blocked key parts of the Trump agenda when it mattered most. He loved the attention. He loved the viral clips. He loved the invitations to the big shows. And he cared more about being the clever contrarian than about delivering results for the people of Kentucky. Democrats and the legacy media loved quoting him because he could always be counted on to undermine Republicans at the most inconvenient moments. He joins the ash heap of people like Mitt Romney, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Liz Cheney before him. That's where he belongs. So he became their favorite Republican to trot out whenever they needed to say, see, even some on the right agree with us. He was a useful idiot for the enemy. And last night, the voters reminded everyone that clicks and retweets are not votes. Viral moments are not governance. Grandstanding is not leadership. Thomas Massie didn't lose because of some vast Jewish conspiracy. He lost because the people he claimed to speak for finally got tired of the show. And the most delicious irony of this spectacular defeat is how Massie himself helped author the script for his own downfall. Because in the final weeks of his campaign, he didn't run a normal congressional race. He turned it into a traveling circus, a full-blown reality TV production for the retard right. He invited a ragtag army of fringe influencers, never Trump podcasters, anti-Israel commentators, all of them to descend on Kentucky like some kind of digital pilgrimage. They're out there live streaming from coffee shops, holding rallies in strip malls, posting endless clips, and they treated the whole thing like their personal content farm. And it looked exciting if you live on X. It looked like a movement. To normal Republican voters in Kentucky, though, it looked like a freak show, and they didn't want any part of it. The very people who spent years hyping Massie as untouchable, these edgelords, these outrage merchants, I will call them, the podcast bros, they ended up accelerating his defeat. That's the irony. They reinforced every bad instinct he had. They fed the grandstander in him. And when the real voters spoke, that illusion shattered completely. And you know what? If you needed one final undeniable piece of evidence that Thomas Massie was a fraud and a grandstander all along, he gave it to you on primary day itself. In the closing hours before Kentuckians went to the polls, his campaign sent out mass text messages featuring Donald Trump's old 2022 endorsement, deliberately presented to mislead, to make voters think Trump was still backing him. Trump himself had to publicly call it fraudulent and reaffirm his strong endorsement of Ed Galrine. This wasn't a mistake. This was a desperate, calculated act of deception by a man who knew he was losing and couldn't handle it gracefully. The guy who spent years lecturing everyone else about integrity and principle, well, he resorted to misleading his own voters in the final hours, and that tells you everything. And I want to hit this one more time about this Israel bought the seat lie, because it's so perverse. Because the conspiracy crowd, his little podcast bro supporters, they didn't waste any time. The moment the results came in, they all started screaming that Israel bought the seat. And in fact, Thomas Massie, the dishonorable individual himself, said that AIPAC and Miriam Adelson rigged the whole thing, that poor little Tommy was just a victim of the all-powerful lobby. It is true that pro-Israel groups spent a lot of money, tens of millions. It became one of, if not the most expensive House primaries in history. But what the conspiracy theorists conveniently leave out always is that lobbying, again, is how American politics works on every single issue. The NRA spends money. Teachers unions spend money. Again, the Chamber of Commerce, trial lawyers, environmental groups, Saudi Arabia, China, everyone spends money. Like it or not, that's representative democracy and the First Amendment. It's not a grand Jewish conspiracy. And AIPAC exists because a strong alliance with Israel is in America's clear national interest. And supporting Canada to back that alliance is what every single interest group does. The NRA supports people that are going to support gun control. They're going to support the Second Amendment and oppose gun control. Massie didn't lose because the Jews spent money. And I know this is hard for you people that love Massie, that were misled or frankly just agree with him because you're part of the retard right. I know this is hard for you to hear, but it's the truth. He lost because he spent years as a professional contrarian who repeatedly voted against his own party and against Trump's agenda when it counted. He grandstanded on the Epstein files with Democrats for cheap publicity. He turned his campaign into an online circus. He alienated the base that follows Trump. And the voters in Kentucky's 4th district wanted a team player who's going to actually deliver results. They didn't want a showman performing for podcast audiences. And, you had the personal allegations that surfaced from a former girlfriend that added to the picture of a man who presented himself as morally superior while apparently living by different rules. And whether every detail of that is proven or not, voters saw the full package and they rejected it. And this is Trump's party now. It's his Republican Party now. It has been. And if you want to win, you get on the team. If you want to grandstand and play the lone wolf for internet applause, you get shown the door. And last night, the voters showed Thomas Massie, Mr. Pinecone, and every influencer who hyped him exactly where that door is. And I would like you to show you that door too. We don't need you or want you. Obviously. Now, I want to get into the San Diego Islamic Center shooting. Shifting to a much more serious and tragic topic that deserves our full attention. So two teenage gunmen on the 18th. It was the first day of the sacred Muslim month, Dhul Hijjah. These two teenage gunmen, 17-year-old Kane Lee Clark, a high school wrestler from Madison High, and 18-year-old Caleb Vasquez from Chula Vista, they pulled up to the Islamic Center of San Diego in Claremont. This is San Diego's largest mosque, complete with an attached school where little kids in kindergarten through 3rd grade were simply trying to go about their ordinary day, right? And the shooters arrived dressed in camo and tactical gear. They were heavily armed with rifles and handguns. Over 30 firearms were later seized from their homes. They opened fire outside the mosque around 11:43 a.m., and they murdered 3 men. A security guard who was only 51 and the father of 8. He was a Muslim convert. Another one was 78, a longtime staffer known as Abu, and Nadir Awad, who was 57. And the shooters, they fled a few blocks away in a BMW, and they turned the guns on themselves. So there are 5 dead total, including the mass murderers. They live streamed this attack with helmet cams. This is so disturbing. The poison in our youth today. This era of technology, they live streamed the attack with helmet cams. They left a 75-page manifesto packed with neo-Nazi symbols, praise for the Christchurch killer, Brenton Tarrant, calling themselves Sons of Tarrant. And they left a broad, indiscriminate hatred that targeted, guess who? Everyone, Muslims, Jews, blacks, LGBTQ people, women, basically anyone who wasn't them. And this is accelerationist poison. One of the mothers, Clark's mother, had actually called the police that very morning around 9:42 a.m. She reported her son missing. She reported her son was suicidal with guns and the car gone. And sadly and tragically, law enforcement was already actively looking for them when the shooting started. They didn't find him in time. And I want to be clear, Amin Abdullah, He is a real hero that day who gave his life. He engaged the shooters in a gun battle at the entrance. He drew their fire away from the building. He radioed for a full lockdown of the school inside, where roughly 140 children and teachers were huddled in classrooms. And the other two who were killed, Mansour and Nadir, they lured the gunman out into the parking lot to protect the worshipers still inside. And so these three brave men prevented what could have been a massacre of little kids. An armed good guy with a gun, a security guard, and a devoted father, he stepped up and stopped far worse carnage. And I want you to let that truth sink in deeply the next time the Democrats and their media allies scream for more gun control that would disarm law-abiding citizens. Now, look, the history of this particular mosque is genuinely alarming, and we cannot ignore it if we want the full picture. The Islamic Center of San Diego, also known as Abi Bakr al-Siddiq Mosque, it's best known as the place where two of the 9/11 hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mindhar, they prayed, they networked, they found apartment leads through the mosque bulletin boards, they received social service help from members, and they used San Diego as a staging base while training for their suicide missions. So this specific mosque was under serious scrutiny after 9/11. It has documented ties to the North American Islamic Trust and long-standing allegations of Muslim Brotherhood connections. And the current imam there, Taha Hassani, he's led the center since 2004. After the barbaric October 7th Hamas atrocities in 2023, the rapes, the beheadings, the burning of babies alive, he did not issue a clear, unequivocal condemnation. Instead, he spoke of resistance being justified under occupation and blamed Zionist genocide. And his wife and his daughter amplified graphic anti-Israel and anti-Jewish content. And locals have been reporting this ongoing tension with a nearby Hebrew charter school. And yet this center continues to receive federal security grants. Now, does any of this history justify two neo-Nazi teenagers opening fire and murdering people? Absolutely not. Evil is evil. There's no excuses. But it completely shreds the left's sort of sanitized, one-sided victim narrative. Because, look, this is a separate thing, but radical Islam has brought supremacist ideology, a conquest mindset, and terrorism to American shores long before these two troubled kids picked up their guns. And we saw it at this very mosque with 9/11. We saw it at Pulse nightclub at Fort Hood. And there are endless examples across Europe with no-go zones and grooming gangs. And every single time Americans raise legitimate concerns about open borders, failed assimilation, or importing, unassimilating Muslims, the left screams Islamophobia. And yet the moment domestic fringe radicals lash out, it becomes a national crisis of white supremacy. And this is used to smear conservatives, to champion open borders, to oppose the Second Amendment, to erode our rights and freedoms. And before the blood was even dry on the pavement, I knew exactly how the mainstream media and the political left were going to play this. They didn't issue a broad, principled condemnation of all political violence. When a leftist with a manifesto that reads like a Barack Obama speech or a CNN segment murders people in a clear example of an ideologically driven attack from the left, targeting conservatives or killing Charlie Kirk, for example, they say, we condemn all acts of political violence. No, they didn't condemn all acts. They were laser focused. Right-wing extremism, Islamophobia. Anyone who's ever criticized radical Islam or demanded secure borders and real assimilation. CARE, as a matter of fact, did do exactly what I predicted. They were on the networks or putting out press statements afterwards. You know, trying to put blood on conservative hands. Newsom, Mamdani, they said we stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers. They didn't say that about conservatives or TPUSA after Charlie Kirk was murdered. And, this whole Nazi thing, too. And these people were self-declared, Nazis, which is strange because if you're a Nazi, you'd think you would have gone after the Hebrew Center down the street, not the mosque. But, Nazis and the SS were never conservative viewpoints. They have nothing in common with us or Trump. Conservatism is limited government, it's individual liberty, it's tradition, it's rule of law. Nazism was totalitarian, big government socialism, national socialism, central planning, collectivism, identity obsession, grievance hierarchies with a racial twist instead of class. And it had far more in common with the left than with actual conservatism. I mean, the Nazis' core obsession was Jews. The Holocaust, the camps, the extermination machinery. And, Nazi Germany, just for the record, actually had alliances and collaborations with certain Muslim leaders against the British and the Jews. So the left's Nazi analogies are pure ahistorical propaganda. And if you remember back in Buffalo, New York, with that supermarket shooting, it's the same playbook. Same with the assassination of Charlie Kirk last September and with every leftist act of violence, as I was saying before. When Peyton Gendron killed Black Americans in Buffalo many years ago, his manifesto mixed white supremacy with great replacement ideas, anti-Semitism, and this eco-fascist nonsense. And the media tied it to conservatives and Trump, whitewashing his fringe left overlaps. And I do want to address something because I am the minister of truth here in Mott Studios on this circulating rumor that the shooters were a gay couple or transgender. There is zero credible evidence that I've seen of that. And again, I mean, the manifesto itself contains explicit anti-LGBTQ hatred. So this is still, last time I checked, unverified social media speculation. I mean, the real serious issue anyway, documented problem, it's this toxic online radicalization that's turning disaffected young men into these vessels of murder. And the bottom line is we're seeing, again, the consequences of multiple cascading failures in our society. We're seeing the breakdown of families and fatherhood, the replacement of faith and real community with poisonous internet echo chambers, a culture that rewards grievance and resilience, grievance and victimhood over responsibility and resilience. We don't fix any of this with more gun control theater. We don't fix it with diversity seminars that pretend all ideologies are equal. They're not. So prayers for the victims' families in San Diego. Prayers for the broader community. Absolutely. Prayers even for the shooters' families who lost sons to this darkness and evil. If you're just joining live, this is Drew Allen, the Left Coast Liberator. I want to end today with a little lighter story, but with some important lessons about the latest Hollywood open marriage confession, because nothing says, of course, wholesome family values like Mr. Feeny himself revealing he and his wife tried the polyamory experiment decades ago. And as a matter of fact, I've got a song I've created for you all to introduce this topic. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy this this special treat brought to you by the Drew Allen Show here.
Welcome to the swinging sounds of 1950s Hollywood, where the vows are flexible and the hearts are breakable. Back Back in 51, when the ring was new, Mr. Feeny said I do, and Mrs. Feeny too. But the New York scene was wild and free. They said, baby, what's good for you is good for me. No chains, no strings, just a little swing, while the neighbors did the cha-cha till the birds would sing. They tried that open marriage, thought it'd be a gas, till the green-eyed monster kicked their doors right in. Oh, what a crash. Open the door, Mr. Feeny, let the good times swing. Share your baby with the town, let the whole world have a fling. But when she cried those midnight tears and jealousy walked in, that open door started slamming and the pain came crashing in. Oh, Mr. Feeny, what a scene, what a show. That open marriage boomerang came back and stole the glow. You can swing it, you can sing it, but you can't make it last, 'cause the good Lord made one heart for one heart. That's a fact. 20 years they played the game like it was high-class fun, till one producer caught his eye and the damage got done. Bonnie cried, I can't take no more of this free love jive. Closed that open marriage faster than a 1955 jive. They packed up for California, tried to start anew, played husband and wife on TV like the dream was true. 75 years later, they're still holding hands, but that open chapter, baby, it sure made its demands. Open the door, Mr. Feeny, let the good times swing. Share your baby.
All right, that's a special treat. And by the way, you can find all this music. I'll put it up. You can subscribe to my Substack, drewallen.substack.com. And I will make sure these songs that we're playing on the Drew Allen Show are available elsewhere. If you missed last week's episode, we had a couple bangers for you about different subjects that were obviously fun, parody songs, but makes this show interesting and unique, I think. So, Mr. Feeny, Boy Meets World, right? Just when you thought that Hollywood couldn't get any more predictable in its moral decay, along comes this story that caught my eye that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with Tinseltown's view of marriage, with fidelity and human nature. Now, William Daniels, he's the beloved actor who played Mr. George Feeny from Boy Meets World. And I guess the show was in the 90s. You know, this is dating me, but some of you are older than me. Some of you are younger than me, but, you know, I was born in 87, and Boy Meets World was a part of my cultural consumption back then on television. But George Feeny was the wise, buttoned-up teacher who dispensed life lessons to Corey, Sean, and Topanga, these high school students on the show for years. And his wife, not on the show, real life, Bonnie Bartlett, they have decided to revisit their open marriage chapter. Now, in her 2023 memoir, Middle of the Rainbow, Bonnie Bartlett Daniels, who is now 96 years old, she revealed that after marrying in 1951, she and William, who is 99, had what she described as an open marriage for roughly the first 20 years. They, quote, never felt tied to fidelity. It was the 1950s and the 1960s in New York's entertainment scene. Lots of sex, lots of freedom, lots of people doing all sorts of things. And they didn't sit down and make formal rules, she says. It just happened. But the fairy tale fell apart, as it almost always does with these experiments. Bonnie says that it became very painful. Then, in the 1970s, William had an affair with a producer that left her devastated, she said. She realized she could no longer tolerate any kind of open marriage. So they closed it up, they moved to California, and they apparently recommitted. And they're still together after nearly 75 years. This is Hollywood's longest active marriage. And they even played husband and wife on St. Elsewhere and won Emmys on the same night. So there's quite a remarkable love story here. But in these recent interviews promoting the milestone anniversary, they've been setting the record straight. And William says he wouldn't be with anyone else. Bonnie clarifies that headlines exaggerated things. It wasn't some structured swinging arrangement, just the free love spirit of the era that got messy when real emotions and jealousy entered the picture. And my friends in the Mott Squad, this is the perfect Hollywood morality tale. And especially if you are a younger person out there, this is such an important lesson. And I say this as a married man who's been married since 2017 to the same woman, the love of my life, with two young, beautiful girls, a 3-year-old and a 16-month-old. But this man, William, Mr. Feeny, the character's name on the show, but William is his real name. He was an actor that generations of families trusted to teach kids about integrity, responsibility, doing the right thing, and growing up. And in real life, he and his wife decided traditional marriage vows, forsaking all others, were optional in the beginning. And so they tried the enlightened, modern, sexually liberated approach that the cultural elites have been pushing since the sexual revolution. And surprise, surprise, it hurt. It caused pain. It nearly blew up their marriage when one partner's fling hit too close to home. And this is what always happens with open marriages. Polyamory, ethical non-monogamy, or whatever shiny new label they slap on old-fashioned cheating. The sales pitch sounds so modern and sophisticated. More freedom, less jealousy, modern love. But the reality is jealousy, heartbreak, insecurity, and broken trust. Human beings aren't wired for it. We are wired because we have a creator, God, who wired us for exclusive, covenantal love between one man and one woman. It is biology. It is psychology. It is thousands of years of human history and every major religion on earth that confirms this. Hollywood pretends otherwise because it sells tickets, memoirs, and garbage. And the left loves to mock traditional values as outdated and repressive. And I want you to remember this because most of the left's positions that have gotten us to this situation culturally, especially, they're always labeled progressive, as if abandoning what is a tested truth, abandoning it for something that's wrong is somehow improving, and it's not. So here we have one of the longest Hollywood marriages surviving, not because of the open phase, but because they eventually abandoned it and they chose exclusivity. The open experiment was the painful detour. It was not the secret sauce. And so Mr. Feeny spent years on television telling young people to be good, to be loyal, to rise above their baser instincts. And then off screen, he and his wife were living the very 1960s counterculture script that undermined those lessons for millions. And the irony in this, to me, is just, it's thicker than a Hollywood producer's ego. This story isn't really about two elderly actors airing their laundry. It is a microcosm of what happens when a culture discards Judeo-Christian sexual ethics for if it feels good, do it. You get skyrocketing divorce rates, you get fatherless homes, you get confused kids and endless therapy bills. And even the couples who make it work on paper often carry scars from the experiment. And this is the latest proof. So congratulations to William and Bonnie on 75 years together. That is an achievement worth noting in Hollywood. But let us not romanticize, let us not normalize the open marriage chapter, because that was not enlightened. It was a painful lesson that they learned the hard way. And the rest of us don't need to repeat their mistake just because celebrities confess it in memoirs. Marriage, believe me, is hard enough without inviting chaos. And fidelity is not repression, it is the foundation of real intimacy, trust, and family stability. That is the truth the Hollywood elite never want to say out loud. They'll keep selling the fantasy while their own lives prove the reality. All right, this is Drew Thomas Allen, your millennial minister of truth, the left wing, left coast, I should say, liberator. God bless you all. And until tomorrow, actually. Adios.